Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Madam Chairperson. While we get the presentation up, let me thank Dimuthu and the Council for inviting me to come as the opening batsman. Hope I will not disappoint you. Okay, then. So I'm going to talk to you on the insights into the diabetes epidemic in South Asia. This is my outline. I think I don't need to elaborate on the pandemic that we are facing, but I would like you to concentrate on few things. While we have about 537 million people with diabetes, if you look at the various regions, all the regions are going to increase their prevalence, but if you look at the South Asian region, we are going to have a quite a tremendous increase compared to the America and Europe, while being a high prevalent region. The other thing is, these are the estimates and projections. You can see how the trajectory of the diabetes pandemic has evolved and going to evolve, and I'm going to show you that this is going to be rubbish, and we are going to be overwhelmed, and all these projections and estimates are going to be wrong in no time. And these are some numbers of deaths. Diabetes not only causes disability. And if you look at the number of deaths due to corona during the pandemic, it's about close to about 7 million. But if you look at the number of deaths per year among people with diabetes 20 to 80 years, it's more or less the same during 1 year, similar to the pandemic that we experienced and the whole saga that we did with the pandemic. And this is what happened to the demographics of the South Asian region. We were quite younger populations, but with time, now this is what has happened, and this is what is going to happen in the future, where we are going to have an increasingly older the population, where there will be much older people compared to the young. And we have increases in our per capita income, and also we have seen quite dramatic urbanization in countries like India, Pakistan. And with these changes, we see that South Asia are among the global leaders in diabetes, not a good thing. And also, if you look at the prevalences of diabetes, again, Pakistan is number 1. And I will show you that Sri Lanka should be also in the top 10 with some of the new data. And not only the common garden diabetes, but things like hyperglycemia in pregnancy. We know that diabetes associated in pregnancy leads to poor maternal and fetal outcomes. And not only that, it can lead to problems in the future generation by fetal imprinting and so on. So this is also not going to be a good thing for us. And also, if you look at the overall diabetes-related healthcare expenditure in the world, it is again dramatically increasing. But see the discrepancy that we are going to have. Southeast Asia is going to have, despite the high numbers, the lowest spending for diabetes, either maybe treatment or prevention. And if I take you through some of the country-specific data, this is one of the biggest studies done in India, ICMR INDIAB study. It showed that India has quite a heterogeneous prevalence in diabetes across the its provinces or states with the overall prevalence. But again, I don't think that this is going to be anyway closer to what it should be now. And again, with the Indian data, it showed that there's quite a difference in the rural and urban prevalences, as well as if you look at the risk factors. Again, we know all about this. Age, male sex, again, I'm going to show you that it's not going to be correct for the South Asia across the board. Abdominal obesity, general obesity, hypertension, family history, and all these are known things, and I will show you some new things as we go on. So if you look at the trends in Sri Lanka, which we know a lot, this is the usual trends up to about 2005. And in 2006, we showed that the population prevalence was 10%. And again, about 36% was undiagnosed. And also, at that time, we could not sample North and the East, but we showed that the prevalence is highest in the urbanized areas, and then the closely followed decrease in trend according to the reducing level of urbanicity, and the areas which were least urbanized had the lowest prevalence. And in 2018, we did a study. We embarked on an ambitious study, but could not do the entire country. We did in the Western province and showed that the prevalence is around 30% in the Western province. And overall, the non-diabetes is about 20 and newly diagnosed about 10. These data are from Pakistan. Here they have done a meta-analysis and shown that over about 1995 to about 2020, there are several studies, and because of this time gap, there are marked differences in the prevalence. You can see in 1995, about 10%, now about 26% according to the study by Dr. Basit, one of our good friends. Again, I don't think that this can be considered important because the pool analysis is between studies over 20 years, so it's not going to represent the true picture in the Pakistan. But this is the latest study published in Sri Lanka. Again, quite a good study done across the board in Sri Lanka, and you can see the eye-watering data. The overall prevalence of diabetes, both rural and urban, is 23%. And the important things to consider are that particularly the prevalences are much higher in the, not in the very old age groups, but in the working 50 to 70 age groups is having very high prevalences. And also particularly you see in the 18 to 40 age group had the highest undiagnosed diabetes. So these have major implications onto the screening, because we generally recommend screening for people above 35. So this is not going to be hold true anymore. And also you see the differences in men and women. Both our 2006 study also showed that in Sri Lanka, women have higher diabetes. And then there are differences in the ethnicity. We still have the differences in the urban-rural prevalences, but the gap is getting narrow. And the other important thing to see is that although diabetes is still slightly higher in the more affluent people, you see in the poorest, the prevalence is 20%. So this is again very important in our future actions. Now, this is a Lancet paper done by some colleagues about a few years ago. You see the trends based on many studies that they have made these trends. But see, the highest is about, they expect it to be around 13% in 2015. Now let me show you what has happened. Over this period, before even 2020, Sri Lanka has shown a prevalence of around 23% and Pakistan about 26%. And what are we going to expect in 2050? So this is what we need to see, and this is why I said that all these projections are wrong, going to be wrong. And also the global impact of the Asian pandemic or Asian diabetes epidemic is huge, because we know that Asians live across the globe, and about 25% of the population or more are South Asian, so this has a tremendous impact globally. Now let me take you through some phenotypic features of the Asian diabetes epidemic. Let me show you from our own data. Now here is the data on the mean BMI. Actually, I don't have that slide here, but if I plotted the diabetes prevalence, more or less it is identical to the mean BMI. And again, similarly, the mean waist circumference also follows that, and mean per capita expenditure also is quite similar. So you might wonder that people eat more, they have more money, eat more, become obese, and they got diabetes. But if you look at the energy consumption, this is completely the other way. The Western province has the lowest and the UA has the highest. So this is due to this disparity between the physical exercise and the obesity, which is elegantly shown here in this slide, where you see the most active, the leanest people versus the most inactive and the the fattest people, the difference in the prevalence of diabetes. And this has been highlighted by many other people, showing that at an identical BMI of 22, you see the difference in the body fat percentage between a Caucasian, white Caucasian, 9% versus 21% in a South Asian. So what is the type of diabetes we are dealing with? We have insulin requiring diabetes about 5% or less, so it's predominantly type 2. And also we have shown that there are some rare types like mitochondrial diabetes as well as autoimmune diabetes. This is some data from young people. You see again still in people younger, less than 40, about 90% we have diabetes. The other types are much smaller. So what is driving the South Asian diabetes epidemic? Is it genetics? Is it the insulin resistance? Is it the age, obesity, physical inactivity, urbanization, other, or combination? So these are some data from South Asians on insulin resistance, the fasting insulin, then incremental insulin and HOMA. You see the South Asian when compared to the East Asians, Chinese and Arabics have high insulin resistance. But this is more or less same data. But if you look at this paper from Dr. Venkat Narayan, eminent Indian living in the US, he has shown that this is not true across the board. He has compared South Asians versus US blacks and US whites, and he has shown that the South Asian, the HOMA IR, is lower than the US whites and the US blacks. But if I show you this, you see the HOMA IR here, which is a measure of insulin resistance. The South Asians has lower HOMA IR. But if you look at the HOMA B, which is an indicator of insulin beta cell function, we have more or less the lowest beta cell function across these ethnic groups. And then he has come up with this review, and he has suggested that it might be that we have quite poor beta cell function along with lean body mass. So we have a lower muscle mass and relatively increased fat mass, which lead to impaired insulin secretion as well as action. And there may be other issues related to lifestyle, which I will touch upon as we go on. And then Naveed Satta is also a very eminent researcher on South Asian diabetes, living in UK, himself being a South Asian. He has come up with this elegant sort of explanation through multiple studies that we may be having higher percentage of fat mass, may be determined by genetic factors, fetal programming, epigenetic factors, lifestyle factors, or everything together. And then we have lower percentage of lean mass, and also there are emerging evidence that we have lower capacity for subcutaneous fat storage, lower cardiorespiratory fitness, lower capacity for muscle fat oxidation, all of which leads to increased insulin resistance, and then also lifelong compensatory hyperinsulinemia, which leads to beta cell failure, which is also maybe genetically determined by lower beta cell capacity, ultimately leading to type 2 diabetes. We were much interested at some point on the genetics to be one of the causes, and some of our studies showed some loci for South Asians, and also GWAS also had some hope, but later on, although there were some indicators, but they were not enough to explain the South Asian pandemic. And we have done, you can see the odds ratios compared between the Europeans and Sri Lankans in our own work. You see more or less there's similar trajectory. And so if not genes, what is it? Is it environmental pollution, infections, epigenetics? So we need further research to find out the etiology. Now, if you look at the societal impact and the deaths attributable to diabetes, I think I showed you this before. Southeast Asia, which include the South Asia, has quite higher diabetes-related deaths. And then also, if I take you through some data, I will not go into individual data. All these data on diabetic nephropathy and then retinopathy has shown that South Asians have higher prevalence of diabetes-related complications compared to the other populations. So is data on neuropathy, which also shows that quite high percentage of people with diabetes. Now here 37%, here 27%, and so on, has diabetes neuropathy. So if you look at the obesity and diabetes, this is famous data from the nurses' health study. You can see the relative risk of type 2 diabetes compared with the BMI. The risk really starts to exponentially increase after a BMI of about 25. That is why the BMI of 25 has been taken for international classification of overweight. But if you look at the BMI on our people, these are data again from our own data, you see the BMI jump from about 18.5 onwards, the diabetes risk is really going up. So this is why we say that South Asians has higher risk of diabetes at a lower BMI. So I have by now told you that diabetes is enormously common in our part of the world and among South Asians across the globe. And our people get diabetes at a younger age and significant impact on mortality, morbidity, and about the obesity paradox, as well as that the South Asians, even the lower socioeconomic groups and the rural areas are getting affected. But we don't have answers on genetic markers, and also we have some data on insulin resistance. Again, it is not as important as what we thought. And then the imbalance of energy intake and expenditure may play a key role. So what is the future? We need to do a lot of other research on pathogenesis, on the effect of sleep, and also epigenetics, endocrine disrupting chemicals, environmental pollution, air pollution, all these are important things. So how are we going to face the challenge? Because we know that it's type 2 diabetes doesn't occur overnight. Normal people go through pre-diabetes, then diabetes, complications, and die. So we need to have South Asian specific interventions. If you look at the latest ADA algorithm, I think this will be discussed during the next 3 days over and over, so I don't go into details. It is so complicated. And if you look at some of these interventions like GLP-1 receptor agonists, it might be several fold of a salary of an ordinary man in this part of the world. So these are not going to be the answers. But still, some of these interventions like SGLT2 inhibitors, which will reduce the adiposity and the body weight, we have shown that they can be used and they are effective in reducing A1C and body weight, as well as protecting the kidneys. So we need to get the good side of the scientific discoveries and see how they are applicable in our part of the world. And then for secondary prevention, again, we have many challenges for early diagnosis, evidence-based treatments, disease monitoring, because we don't, I think we discussed this over and over yesterday about the self-monitoring, flash monitoring, CGMS. So this is going to be hugely costly, particularly in a crisis like this. Again, if you look at tertiary prevention, like rehabilitation of amputees, retinal injections, dialysis, transplantation, again, not going to be helpful in a population perspective because of the cost. So if you look at the primary prevention of type 2 diabetes, we know about the Finnish diabetes prevention study, which showed that 58% reduction can be done by simple lifestyle measures if you intervene at pre-diabetes stage. Because of this evidence, the NHS in UK, they have come up with this diabetes prevention program, spending a lot of money, and the Indian diabetes prevention program by Ramachandran also showed that this can be done in our people. But if you look at the impact, they showed that the effect size is much less than that is seen in the diabetes prevention study. And there are several other studies on primary prevention of diabetes. The Kerala diabetes prevention program did not show major breakthrough. And we are doing a study, actually more or less we have finished the study called Eye Health Type 2 Diabetes, again in 3 South Asian countries, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, India, in fact also in immigrants or migrants in UK, South Asian migrants in UK, and this is, we have published the protocol. And if you look at some basic unpublished data from the Sri Lankan cohort. Now here we see at the follow-up one, the diabetes prevalence was 6.7 in the group, active group, whereas it was the 15% in the inactive group. And even, now this is after the pandemic, economic crisis and everything, even after that, without any intervention follow-up, the differences persist. So there is some hope on diabetes preventive work in our part of the world. Now here is some elegant data from again Naveed Satta, who has done some preventive work in migrant South Asians, and he has shown now here, again you can see the age versus diabetes. We see that there's about a 5 to 10 year earlier onset of diabetes in South Asians compared to white Caucasians. But what he has shown in the data is that lifestyle interventions to prevent diabetes usually should happen earlier and should be intense, more intense than what they have advocated and adopted for white people in Finland and US. So this is what is coming up with the latest data on some preventive studies. So, but still, there are many challenges for primary prevention, like the cost, cultural adaptation, the community involvement, sustainability, all of these are issues. So, is there a possibility of cure or reversal? You might know that bariatric surgery has shown that you can reverse diabetes, and also the direct study, an elegant study looking at diabetes remission showed that with dramatic weight reduction, you can do that. You see, after 15 kilogram weight loss, 86% reversed to have, reverse in their type 2 diabetes. And we also did some work on these areas. You see in this work, not like a randomized control study, the basic work, real-time world sort of work, where about 283 people were offered. About half, just about more than half accepted, but those who really completed is quite small, about 51%. But in the people who followed the program, you see about 65% were able to remit in their type 2 diabetes. So there is quite a good hope if we really work hard to reverse diabetes and get the numbers down in our people who get diabetes at a younger age. But again, we need to look more on the availability, cost, complications on bariatric work, and also on the feasibility, cost effectiveness, and sustainability on lifestyle modification and remission. So we need to also use our common sense knowledge on primordial prevention, because the problems start happening in children and also during pregnancy. So we need to target children and young adults on prevention of obesity, increasing physical exercise, and also having healthy pregnancy without much weight gain, and also postpartum period, and the monitoring of growth, development, and not getting the children to get too much of rapid weight gain, and all these things are very important on primordial prevention. And for all these upstream factors, we need to get together and influence the political hierarchy, and also need to get legislative changes on diet, exercise, food advertising, particularly among children, and then we need to get all the stakeholders on board, and particularly on even designing our agriculture, built-in environment, everything to be healthy. And also there is emerging data on the need of physical activity among South Asians, and there is some data that the sedentariness is more among South Asians, and that we need more physical activity compared to the white Caucasians to be healthy. So this is based on some of these data from India. They have come up with physical exercise guidelines, which is more or less advocating double the amount of physical exercise that is advocated for the white Caucasians. So ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we have high burden of diabetes in South Asia. I have shown the picture, exceeding all previous projections. And the new data is really eye-watering, and because of this, we need representative, ongoing, regular epidemiological studies. And we'll need to this will lead to a wave of other epidemics of CKD, blindness, neuropathy, amputations, and cardiovascular disease. So we need novel strategies on prevention, remission, and also to face the epidemic by effective treatments which are specific for South Asian people with low obesity but higher fat mass. So we need more aggressive efforts as well as research to prevent this the already happened tsunami. It's not going to happen. It has already happened. We need to now reduce the damage of the tsunami. Thank you very much.